We've done some different types of conversations in the past. Everything from why
Mhm.
people and where they're investing in Alberta to trends and what's going on. But we've realized a very specific trend right now in the marketplace. And you were talking about it right before we started the podcast. And so we've called an audible and changed the way that we're going to focus today's conversation on realistically what's trending, which is the new people joining us. So what are you noticing here, Mike?
What's up, guys? You are listening to the YBR Remo Show, where we talk all things Vancouver real estate and mortgages, take boring topics and make them interesting. Make sure to stay tuned to listen to everything you need to know how to put cash back in your pocket, create wealth in real estate, and simplify the complicated.
Okay, we're back and recording again with my good friend Michael Ponte. If you don't know him by now, well, you should. He's been with us now, Mike. This is third time on the show in the past 3 years, so that says a lot. A lot of people must like you, Mike. Well, we like you. I like you. So glad to have you.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, that's awesome. It's always great to be here. So it's always a treat. So I thank you.
I love to hear that, man. Well, listen, we've done some different types of conversations in the past. Everything from why people and where they're investing in Alberta to trends and what's going on. But we've realized a very specific trend right now in the marketplace. And you were talking about it right before we started the podcast. And so we've called an audible and changed the way that we're going to focus today's conversation on realistically what's trending, which is the new people joining us. So what are you noticing here, Mike?
Well, it's actually quite interesting. I think for a lot of people, well, we've got individuals that are just like sitting on the sidelines. They don't know what to do, and they're just like really nervous. Interest rates are going up, and so you got this one perspective that people are like, you know what? I'm just going to wait it out and hold out. And then I've got other individuals and talking to lots of different people, and you've got a lot of people who are just like, well, you know what? 2023 might be a banner year. This might be a good opportunity to get going. And so it's actually opening up some eyes finally, because they're just like, well, the market's not as crazy as it once was. The demand's not there like it once was, but there could be some really good opportunities. And there's a lot of new investors or potential new investors that are just like, this could be my time. I think it's my opportunity to start learning maybe about real estate investing and being able to take advantage of the opportunities that are planned ahead for 2023. So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
you're right. And no doubt, interesting to hear that you said that because we've noticed the same on our side right here, just with the types of inquiries that we're getting and applications from people who are just starting that conversation. And you're probably hearing a lot about this even more so than we are, because typically people often don't apply until they're prepared to do so. So
Mhm.
yeah, let's dig into today's conversation. The purpose of the call or the focus is to really get down to principles and the foundations of making money when it comes to real estate as an investment specifically. Now, we've got all sorts of listeners on our podcast. Some invest, some don't, some are at different levels, but I feel like there's never a bad thing about getting back to the core and specifically talking about it as
Totally.
a right and specifically as it pertains to maybe some different ways to look at it now compared to a year or 2 or 3 years ago. Starting off, Mike, I think like the first thing and the interesting thing when I hear of people talking about getting involved or starting to think about real estate as an investment is this whole thought process of your financial strategy, like the old way of doing it versus the new way, so to speak, right? The old way was well, I mean, how people thought about their financial lives was I go to school, I take on a student loan, I get a degree, I get a job, I pay off debt, and I save some money. And then boom, I retire. Maybe I have a pension. We all know that that's probably going to be tough for most people these days, not only because of the cost of living, but because, of course, just the general way that people are paid with regards to pensions have changed. Retirement plans are changing. And so most people are shifting to this new way of thinking, and I'll open it up to you. But I mean, you are one of these people that would be considered a mentor. There people are looking for mentors. They're looking to be more entrepreneurial in spirit. They want, they want to learn. They're listening to podcasts like this, and they're cool with the idea of leveraging investing. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that transition? What are you noticing in that area or that world, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think this has been a trend for a very long time, to be honest with you. And it goes exactly to what you said. Is like, the old days of pensions and stuff like those are great if they're still existing, but they're far and few between. And I think never been a time more so than we're seeing, especially in this generation, where, the concept of side hustle, like there's all sorts of different businesses that people are getting themselves involved with. And even what we're kind of doing here, this world of social media and all these different things, it's amazing what people can do to generate side incomes, but it's becoming much more necessary now because all of our cost of living has just gone through the roof. And so, we've become a society where we are always wanting things, wanting more things, and good for that. That's great. That's exciting, right? But at the end of the day, we need some type of an income stream. And I think a lot of people are also looking for more flexibility in their lives. And so how do they do that when they're working kind of that 9 to 5 job? And so I think this is where people are starting to kind of open up. I shouldn't say start. This is why people are opening up. Why not just real estate investing? There's all these different side businesses or side hustles, as you call them, is that people are exploring to kind of get ahead and create kind of a lifestyle that they're all looking for. And in a lot of cases, it's a little bit more time and more freedom in their lives. And real estate is one of those things. And I think this is where there's this big appeal to it, because I can buy a piece of real estate. There's opportunities to grow it. I can hold it. By the time it's all said and done, I get this big asset that's paid off at the very end. So like there's a lot of appeal to this, and it's a much more common theme, especially in a younger generation, is they may not want to work at that 9 to 5 job anymore. They don't want to just work on their 9 to 5 job. They want to work on their side hustles, and together get that active income and passive income. And so that's what I tend to see as a really big trend.
Yeah, and no doubt today's conversation isn't specifically about retirement funds, but I think people will be, for most people, I did this presentation last night and I shared how much money would you need in order to retire with, $5,000 a month, assuming you're retiring in 20 years, 30 years actually, at a 2.5% inflation. That's a lot to take in, but basically, how much would you have to save every month? And it was like $1,850 a month at an 8% return based on 2.5% inflation. And that's a lot, again, to take in there. But basically, again, almost $2,000 a month for the next 20 to 30 years to be able to give you $5,000 a month, or the equivalent to $5,000 a month to retire. Like, think about that. And for most people, $5,000 a month, like that's like, that's not a lot of money anymore, right? So, yeah, I think it's time to think about different ways. So let's get into it, man. Today, the purpose is to talk about the different ways that you can get paid by using real estate as one of your options. Before I go too far, I want to say to every listener here, there's so many variations and deviations. So, Mike and I could probably do 15 podcasts on each one of these topics. So we're going to give you guys the cores, the things that you need to know, and the things that, crazy enough, I see seasoned investors sometimes misunderstanding and misinterpreting, which is why Mike's going to come and comment on them. So basically, the 5 different ways we've got, we'll start off with appreciation with leverage. Appreciation itself is something that's often misunderstood. And I'm probably doing it in inverse order because I know you like to call it off of the cherry on the top. But generally speaking, appreciation is relatively straightforward. It's the concept or the idea to start off with values changing and increasing over time. Your asset, because you're purchasing an asset, is increasing in value over time. Now, the ways that benefit you are different, but Mike, take it away. Talk to me about appreciation, how that works for people.
The reality is appreciation is something that you can't budget for. Over time, if you've got a long-term objective, long-term goal, long-term vision with real estate investing, yes, your properties will appreciate. And kind of the general rule that I've understood and learned over the many years doing this is it tends to appreciate about 6% per year when you look at it over a 30-year, 20-year, and a 10-year time frame. Now, within that, there's peaks and valleys that tend to happen. So one year it's great, the next year it's not so great. So you have these all these trends. But if you look at property 30 years ago versus what it is today, it's not the same value. So if you've got a long-term mentality to it, yes, you will get appreciation over time. But at the same time, you got to be really clear that you can't budget for appreciation. You can't just say, oh, this property is going to appreciate 15 or 20 years, or 15 to 20% per year, right? And I think a lot of people are seeing that in this market right now in Vancouver and then also Toronto, and actually other markets as well, where we've seen just gangbuster appreciation over the last 10, 20 years. And now we're seeing things kind of change. But appreciation is one of those things that generate very good returns. When you only have to put 20% down, but the appreciation is based off the full value, it can be quite lucrative, right? Especially in markets that are growing. So again, when you're looking at investing in a particular market, pay attention to what's going on with it. Is it an appreciating market? Is it a depreciating market? Where are we at? But appreciation is absolutely one of the income streams. It works very, very well when you have more of a long-term approach when it comes to real estate investing. So just be very clear that it's not something that you can plan for. It is a little bit speculative, but it is one of the ways a lot of people that own their own homes today or own real estate investing have become millionaires within their own properties, because thanks to appreciation. And that's one of the biggest reasons why is appreciation. But again, it's something that you can't always predict that this is going to happen, especially when you're looking with a short-term approach to it. Long term, you're good.
I think it's like the S&P 500, right? Like you don't know, year over year where it's going to go, but over the long term, it continues to increase in trajectory. And we can talk about the supply versus demand and the location and so forth, and how that impacts
Yep.
appreciation. I think that has to come into your decision. But the reason I think appreciation is important consideration is typically in most situations, again, you could do short term, investing, you could do long term, you could do flips and so forth. But for today's conversation, I'm having a long term definitely mindset here. I mean, let's look 20 years out. 20 years out, it almost doesn't matter which city you buy in Canada. Well, that's not completely true, but to a degree, in most cities that you purchase in, assuming it's you did a good job of doing your research, you're close to urban city center or something of that nature, and there's a growth element to it, you will see appreciation, but you can't bank on it, to your point, Mike, to be 15% or 20%, because those things are anomalies.
Exactly.
So the approach that I take, and if
Yeah.
you're a listener, look at like an average over a 10-year time span, heck, 20 years, and use a conservative number based on that. And for the sake of our conversation, just to illustrate some basic, numbers in terms of appreciation, I used, a 4% appreciation on a $600,000 home over 20 years. And that's pretty reasonable if you think about it. So 4%, again, assuming you did your research there, that $600,000 home is going to be worth 1.3, 1.4. Now, if you live outside of Vancouver or Toronto, that happened in 5 years. But of course, and in some cases
Mhm.
less. But the reality is if we use a 20-year outlook in almost all of these conversations for appreciation, that can be massive. And one of the ways that helps you, and speaking to that, I guess, last point, just talking on the money piece there, Mike, is what you had mentioned earlier, is the asset value and the ability to borrow against appreciation. That's where those things can help you.
Mhm.
So again, you see your asset value go from 600 to, let's say, $1 million in, let's say, 10 years for the sake of conversation, and now you have access to $800,000 that you can draw from that property, right, at a very low rate of interest, and continue to duplicate your efforts. Now, again, it's case
Yeah,
by case,
exactly.
but like, I feel like that one thing, Mike, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here. I feel like the reason that appreciation is misunderstood so frequently is because people expect it so quickly.
Very much so. Yeah, because that's a lot for a lot of people. That's what they've seen in the last 10, 20 years. And in fact, people were buying based on that trend was never going to end. And so you got to have more of a modest approach to it, exactly like you referenced at 4% per year. That's more reasonable. That's a more reasonable time frame. And again, when we recover from the challenges that were here ahead, and again, over a 10-year time frame, is it 15 or 20% per year? I don't know. But right now we're seeing things reverse a little bit. But I'll bet you overall, when you look at it from a 10-year time frame, it's probably going to be higher than what your 4%
Hmm.
is. And so that it still produces a good valuation. But I guess the important part is, go in with a long-term mentality and a long-term approach to it. And that's where a lot of people have had the most success when you're looking at it from that
Well
way.
said. Well said. Well, let's get into number two. And I think number two is an interesting one because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I use it as amortization,
Mhm.
or the ability to amortize a loan. For the sake of conversation
Mhm.
right now, like when you look at amortization, again, it's the ability to take a mortgage loan in this case and amortize that over not 10 years or 15 years like a lot of other assets that are out there, asset classes. In real estate,
Mhm.
you can extend that loan over, well, typically 30 years, but in some cases even
Yeah.
more, which for
Mhm.
a lot of people, they say, how does that make me money? Well, that does something called, well, creating cash flow, which we're going to talk about later, because it assists you in paying down the loan over an extended period of time. And of course, it pushes back the cost of the money to later, right? So it allows you to borrow money at today's rate, so to speak, and purchase at today's cost. And as obviously time goes on, money goes up or down in value, so to speak. So that actually works in your favor, funny enough. So, Mike, any
Mhm.
thoughts on amortization as a factor of how you make money in real estate, or anything that you want to add to that?
Well, I think in the amortization side, you're referencing as kind of more mortgage pay down. Am I correct
Hmm.
in saying that?
Yep. And the time that you're allowed to do so.
Yeah, so it does that. Gives you that ability. So as the market kind of appreciates, and at the same time when you're acquiring it, And this is one of the huge things, when you talk about real estate investing, there's multiple streams of income that are being created here. You got the appreciation, and that's just your market appreciation. And we're keeping things really simple. Yes, people will say, well, you can do forced appreciation. Well, we'll save that for another day just to keep it simple, stupid. And then amortization, really on the mortgage pay down side, that's a huge one. And that is the most consistent one, because guess what? You're paying that mortgage down every single month. You have to. In fact, if you don't, the banks are going to come and take that property away from you. But here's the best part about the amortization or the mortgage pay down on this thing. Who's paying for it? If you're looking at this as a rental property, it's not you. And if you've done this well, it's actually your tenant. And so your tenants are actually paying down the mortgage over a 20 or 30-year time frame. And that's a huge advantage. And again, if it's all done right, that mortgage is constantly being paid down over a long-term approach to this thing every single month that's coming up. I know I love seeing year-end mortgage statements. I've got one right in my hand.
There we go.
And, I got one that I was looking at, principal pay down. This one was $20,000 in one of our apartment buildings. I didn't pay that down $20,000. My tenants paid that down $20,000. That is literally sitting in our account, right? In our mortgage account. So it is one of those ones that is the foundational aspects of where one of the main profit centers when it comes to real estate investing is this amortization or the mortgage pay down side. And again, you go with the long-term approach with this. And if you amortize this exactly like Alex has said, over a 30-year, and you've got a long-term approach to this, and you hold it for 30 years, you have an asset free and clear 30 years later for that full value that you haven't used. You haven't put any of that money in. It's been your tenants that have actually been paying it off. It's one of the most appealing aspects when it comes to real estate.
Totally true. And yes, back to your point, principal pay down is another way to look at that, and perhaps probably the more widely recognized conversation. Thanks for clarifying that, Mike. I mean, that gets me excited more than anything else. I mean, we hear about people say it on social media, online, all the time, talking about, hey, if you have somebody, a renter in your property, you're providing them with a home, when they're providing you with the ability to pay off your mortgage for you. So you might as well continue to own the real estate while someone else pays it off, right? Love that.
Absolutely.
Love it. Okay, so let's talk about cash flow here, because that's obviously the big sexy, so to speak. That's the one that usually brings people into the conversation to start off with, at least that I found. Now that conversation usually shifts in a lot of different ways, but I mean, let's just start off with just quite simply, Mike, how do you explain cash flow really quickly, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. So, and again, this might be a new concept for a lot of people, especially people in Vancouver and Toronto, because there's something that they don't realize, that there is no cash flow in some cases, or very difficult to find. But cash flow in the most simplest terms is income. So it's your rental income every month, okay, minus all of your expenses, which include your mortgage payment, okay? So think about insurance and property taxes and utility bills, all that wonderful stuff, your mortgage payment, okay? So it's income minus expenses. After all the expenses, that is cash flow, okay? That is pure income. Now, it's either in the green, which means there's money going into my pocket every single month, or it's going into the red, which is money going out, okay? So one of the income streams that, if done properly and analyzed well, is you're trying to generate positive cash flow, right? And that's where it's adding more income into my pocket every single month. So again, after the rent, once rent comes in, all those expenses, there is a plus income that goes into your pocket kind of every single month. And for a lot of real estate investors, myself included, this is where they put a lot of focus, is because they are maybe, again, if they're looking to create this kind of side hustle, you want something that's actually producing income, not taking income away from you. And so it's making sure that whatever asset that you are buying, you're trying to find properties that produce positive cash flow. And so it is one of the benchmarks that from my company's perspective and the way I invest, it always has to generate cash flow. I treat all my real estate assets as like a business. And I'm not buying businesses that lose money every single month. I like businesses that produce positive cash flow every single month. And so that's kind of my big focus. Now, there's multiple different strategies when it comes to this, and many different reasons why you may want to buy a property that has negative cash flow. But in times like this, where we're seeing rates increasing and all of these expenses going up and high inflationary pressure, having an asset that's producing positive cash flow is such a huge benefit because it can override a lot of it can help you manage through the challenges that are currently happening today. I'm very fortunate that all of our assets are cash flowing. And so we're able to buck the trend a little bit because, you know what, we're covering all of our expenses. We're covering all our costs. Is the cash flow as high as they was once, 6 months ago? No, but they're still there. It's still balanced, right? And so when you're looking at assets, it's one of those things that it is one of the reasons why a lot of investors get involved. And again, just like anything, it's depending on your investment goals. But if one of your goals is, I want a little more time freedom, then you're looking for income. You're needing to find that income to give you some of that time freedom. And that really comes from cash flow.
I think you like something that you said there. So like again, it depends on the nature. Like this cash flow one is always an interesting one, right? Because there's obviously so many different ways to quote unquote invest and where to earn your money. We've talked about the appreciation piece. We talked about the principal pay down. Some people talk about the sweat equity thing, which we haven't even talked about, or forced appreciation. But it's such an interesting one because I find that cash flow is so divisive in certain areas and cities, and different people have their own thought process on it. But back to your point,
Totally.
I mean, I think if it is solely your purpose to earn an extra income from a lifestyle perspective, then there's no doubt you have to be looking for, again, what does that look like afterwards? How do I protect my downside from that perspective? And with rates being higher, yeah, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. There's
Mhm.
this thought out there that having a property that doesn't cash flow is a terrible thing. I would suggest that's not necessarily the case personally, because I've seen so many different types of investment property situations. And I think what it depends on is your outlook. And that means how much time you have. And number two, like your situation, like what you're trying to do with this particular, property. And of course your personal finances, right? Because if you're in a personal finance situation where right now that's absolutely no issue, you can handle the disruption to your personal finance, it could actually work out exceptionally well in your favor because perhaps you can do something others can't. But it's a different conversation, right?
My very first property that I bought was negative cash flow. It was negative cash flow $50 a month. I didn't really know what the hell I was doing back then, but but really it was negative cash flow $50 a month. And the way I looked at it is, okay, it's $50. That's just one lunch I don't do. But here I am, I own a property where a tenant's paying it down, and I don't have, and I had a long-term vision to that. It's only $50. I really wasn't worried about that. Fortunately, the last couple of years right after, market just blew up and it turned into a positive cash flowing opportunity, and we had all this appreciation. It's when it turned positive is when your eyes start to open, right? But at the end of the day, you're exactly right. It's not that it's a bad thing, but it really has to go back to what your goals and what you're trying to accomplish here, right? And so really ask yourself, am I comfortable with the negative cash flow? Okay, what happens if interest rates go up an extra 2 points? Am I still comfortable with that number? So these are questions that you have to ask yourself, and it goes to why you're investing in real estate to begin with, right?
So good, Mike. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And again, I think that this conversation is one that like it could go in so many different directions, and that's why I tell
Oh yeah,
people right
for
away there
sure.
isn't a right or wrong here. It really depends on why you're buying, where you're buying, what are you doing, your situation, right? Which is, I'm sure, something in your programs and your coaching programs that you have there. You probably go deep into that, I'm sure. So,
For sure.
yeah,
Yep.
right on. Okay, so a fun one. We're not accountants, but we know enough about it to know to do
No.
some trouble. There is tax efficiency when it comes to get making money in real estate. Now, I have some thoughts on this, but Mike, in your experience, like how does this work to people's benefit when we talk about the efficiency or tax efficiency of owning real estate as an investment?
Well, I think there's just advantages that are there. Like, so for people that are, like, if their regular job is just to work, there's not all these advantages from being an employee, right? But when you own a piece of real estate, it is like a business in some cases, and there's all these tax advantages that come along with this. So when you buy a piece of real estate, there's all these expenses that kind of come and that are part of the asset itself, as well as the income. Here we go. If the property is negative cash flow, that is a reduction of your income. So now all of a sudden there's a tax advantage, there's a tax saving that's going along here. For a lot of investors too, they're using their home equity line of credit, okay, to purchase investment properties. Well, the interest on that line of credit is a tax deduction. So there's all these tax advantages that you can utilize here. Now, because you own a piece of real estate and you're working and you're managing things and you're doing books or whatever the case may be in your office, well, a percentage of your office, a percentage of your ink that you use, a percentage of your, all these things are tax deductions that you can now utilize. And again, don't take my or Alex's advice. Don't just say, well, Mike told me I can write off 100% of my home and all. That's not the case. Talk to your accountant. But when you own a piece of real estate, it's like owning a business. And what happens is there are some great tax advantages that kind of come along with this, even just by owning like a small little condo. So there's lots of opportunities where you can have a lot of different types of deductions and efficiencies. And again, this is really important. And again, talk to your accountant, but there's lots of different advantages that come along from this strategy
I
for
mean, you
sure.
hit it right there, man. Like the fact that you are running a business here, right? Like it's not just working a job. You're running a business. There's advantages, all the interest that you pay. That like a lot of people don't realize if they take up money from a home equity line of credit, all the interest that you're paying on that is tax deductible, which means you pay less interest. And if your marginal tax
Yep.
rate is 40 or 50%, that's a huge opportunity and a huge savings in the grand scheme of things. If you're obviously financing this personally, if you're buying this home in your name, so to speak,
Absolutely.
right? I think you touched on this briefly, but I'm not sure how deep you got into that, Mike. But one area that I like to highlight to people, depending on the nature of where they're at in their lives, especially people that have children, is the concept of inheritance and what that looks like. Real estate could be one of the best possible living inheritances, or even passing inheritances from a tax efficiency standpoint that
Mm,
you could ever have. If you have $1 million in the bank and you give that money down, obviously I'm generalizing here, someone's going to get charged tax on the entire $1 million that they receive, right? If your kids get that money.
exactly.
And in most situations, if it's $1 million, they're going to tax 50 something percent because the government wants all your money, right? So you're left with 500,000 bucks. Again, I'm generalizing here, very clear. But if someone owns a real estate asset at $1 million and they have a $250,000 loan left on it, and they bought it for 500,000, and there's a lot here, they're only taxed on the capital gain, so the growth in the property, and they're only taxed at half of that. So basically 250 grand at 50%.
Totally.
So you're now providing someone with an asset that they can continue to keep and or they can sell, and they're paying less than half the amount of tax on that. Like that's mind numbing. And in addition to that, you have somebody else who's basically saving the money for the inheritance. And so I don't know how many people think about that, but how much better is it to have that, hold that property, manage that for 20, 30, 40 years, and then have the asset that you could provide your children, right? That's
Totally,
powerful to me.
100%. And even just the capital gains tax on this alone as well is like when your asset starts to appreciate and you're making income on this thing, you're taxed at 50% of your tax rate. And so with that being said, there's huge advantages of that. So versus like just your regular income, if you're creating different income streams, you're taxed at your normal tax rate. But if you're taking advantage of real estate, markets are appreciating, your mortgage pay downs being, you're taxed at 50% of that of your tax rate. So again, another advantage that comes along with it, right?
So
So
true, man. Well, the last one here that I want to touch on, and we can leave it. We can do a rapid fire of anything we missed afterwards. Is something I call rent inflation. Rent inflation. I mean, I went through and I clipped a bunch of news articles from the last 2 weeks here, and this is pretty topical in Canada right now. Some news articles saying things like average cost of renting a two-bedroom Toronto soars by 24% to more than 3,300. Average monthly rent prices surged 12% in October. Average Metro Vancouver rental price breaks 2,300 for one bedroom apartment. So we're seeing this stuff left, right, and center. And back to your point, yes, you can't count on a 10%, 12%, 24% annualized increase in rental income, but the stats show that, and you might have some different statistics, but the stats that I found, Mike, showed that the average turnover is 8 months. Every 8 months, there's a new tenant in a property, right? So, yes, BC has some pretty tight laws. Some places have tight laws on the ability to raise rents, but eventually most people leave and they move on, and or they do something else, and you can bump up your rent increase, I should say. Maybe touch on that a little bit because people forget that they buy a property today and they think, oh, it's my cash flow today. But guess what? You bought that property 3 years ago and you got a new tenant in there today. You're doing pretty good.
yeah, agreed, 100%. And like think your stat at 8% or 8 months. I think it depends on the type of property because there's lots of variations with that, right? So the more bedrooms you have, the longer the tenants tend to stay is my stat. And again, it does vary. If you got a suite, if you got a bachelor, you'll see more turnover. If you got a one bedroom, you'll see not as much turnover as a bachelor. If you got a three bedroom, then you'll probably see a lot more longevity with your tenants as well. So it really depends on in the type of tenant segment that, or the property segment that you're dealing with. But saying that, you're absolutely right. Is, you may be buying a property today, and again, every market is very, very different. Just to be very clear, just because Vancouver, I'm not even sure what the cap rate is. The rent cap rate is right now in Vancouver. I think it's like 2.5% or 3% or 2% or something like that. That's what the cap rate is based on existing tenants. And so you can only give them that amount. But as soon as they move out, you can increase that rent to whatever level that you're looking to accomplish. And so that's exactly what you said. If you're seeing the time frame about a year and they're turning over, this is where your opportunities are going to be had. And again, this is an important piece when you're looking at your investment strategy or buying a property, especially a property that's currently tenanted. How soon can I raise the rents? But I think to maybe what that slide is highlighting is during times of challenge right now, and this is really important. When you're seeing interest rates going up the way that they are, it's reducing the demand for people buying real estate, purchasing their own homes or doing these things. So because it's becoming more expensive. But that doesn't change that people still need to live in a place. That doesn't change. So what has happened now is that instead of acquiring a property, buying a property, they either are tenants longer, or in some cases, especially what I'm kind of seeing a little bit starting now, they are turning into tenants. So the demand for rental properties goes up. And with the demand for rental properties goes up, our inventory obviously goes down. When there's very little inventory and there's more competition that's going into the rental market, guess what happens to rents? Rents go up. So during times of inflation or challenges like this, people are reducing their costs or minimizing the amount that they're spending. But this is where rental properties can be a little bit of a hedge against inflation. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. Your stats that you were showing are very similar to what I'm doing today. We're looking at about 8 to 15% right now on all of our portfolio of rent increases, because we're investing in markets that are not minimizing our caps on how much we can do. And like in places like Alberta, again, that's what we're seeing, 12 to 15%. And we're just communicating exactly what's going on with the cost of increases and insurance and mortgage rates. We have to pass it on. It's unfortunate, but it's just the reality of what it is. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I think rent inflation is a big one. It is a great hedge. And it's really, really important that when you're looking at your investment that you're looking to acquire, especially with existing tenants, what is the lease agreement? How soon can I raise those rents? If this property fully turns over in a year, I will be able to capitalize that at a later time, right? But definitely, right now, for a lot of landlords that are acquiring, they are all raising rents to where it needs to be, and you're seeing rents going up.
So much gold there, man. So much gold. I don't know much more I can add to that, but yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, there's not a lot more I can add to that, man. You pretty much hit the nail on the head. I got nothing to say. Mic drop, boom. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah. So summarize, guys. I think the biggest takeaway here is obviously we will see rental rates obviously continue to grow. You make it as part of your plan. You can't predict it necessarily, but the type of property that you pick and choose will impact the likelihood that you'll see the turnover, thus obviously impacting the likelihood that you'll see rental rates increase and change. But this is obviously province by province too, right? Like you pop into Alberta, we can raise rents tomorrow. BC, you could have a challenge if somebody stays there for 5 years. There was some good stuff, man. Getting into inflation and so forth. Like I don't even know if I have anything to add. I don't have anything to say. Nothing. That's why we bring you on. That's why we bring you on. So of course we talked about appreciation. We talked about amortization or principal pay down, and how, because I think amortization kind of works in multiple different ways. Principal pay down is a clear. They pay off your money. You pay off your mortgage, I should say. They give you the money. Cash flow, obviously, where people want to land in the long term. And I know that cash flowing thing, to touch back on that one, is a really interesting one, because I think what you do, a lot of people forget this. Listen, if you own 5 pieces of real estate and you're only cash flowing, let's say $100 each on each one, but you've paid off half the mortgage over the course of 10 years, assuming you qualify, you could just go and re-amortize all those loans back to 30 years again, presumptively, and then boom, open up your cash flow tomorrow. So there's different ways to look at it from that perspective too, right? We touched on tax efficiency, handing money down or a home down to your kids instead of losing all of it to the government. Because really, at this point in life, like, how much more money does our government need? None. but moving on, keep the money in your pocket. Look at the way that works in your favor. And then, of course, Mike, you just crushed that rent inflation. Did you want to rapid fire any other quick ones, or is there anything else that you said, hey, people talk about this?
Yeah, I think I think maybe the last one for a lot of people, and again, this is one's not easy for those that are getting started as well. Is one of the ways you can make money in real estate as well is also on the acquisition side of things, and I think it's becoming more prevalent today. Is kind of the phrase that I always like to use is make your money on the buy. It's not easy. Okay, and so it's during times of challenge and during times of challenge that's in the economy and in the market, you tend to get more motivated sellers. And here's your opportunity. And again, it's just another way to make money. It's just not that easy. And so you need to really make sure that you find the right team, the right asset, the right property. But if the market is kind of like $100,000 and somebody is in real tough shape and they need to sell it, maybe you can buy it at $80,000 or $90,000 as an example. So that spread of $10,000 to $20,000 is where you've made money right from the very, very beginning. It's not one that you should always just be focusing on, but in times like what we're seeing today, it does provide a cushion. So if the market continues to kind of go down a little bit further, I think it's really important for people to understand, if you're buying it at market price and the market goes down, are you prepared for that? And so, for a lot of investors that are getting started, you need to kind of be planning for that as well right now. So as markets, if we're anticipating if we're anticipating values to go down, have you built that plan in regards to ensuring that if the price does go down based on when you're acquiring it, are you prepared for that, or are you buying with that intent that the value is going to go down an extra 5 or 10 or 15 or 20%? So I think it's an important one. It's an opportunity where it's another income stream. It's just not easy to do, especially for people that are just getting started. But it's one that I wanted to kind of reference to keep that front of mind, especially when you're dealing with markets that are seeing kind of a little bit more of a downturn. Just protect yourself and make sure you're buying appropriately, not necessarily just what the market is dictating. And you may want to have yourself a little bit of a cushion just to protect yourself from a continued downturn. So
Perfect. I don't think we need to add much more to it, Mike. That pretty much just crushed everything that we needed to talk about here today, man. That's incredible, man. You're such a wealth of information. I always appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all of your knowledge around real estate as an investment. We've talked about this. I did an intro. We talked about this briefly, but Mike, you run a masterclass, Elevate. I believe there's a few different iterations. Are you accepting new people to come in and learn a little about real estate and investment right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we host a series for those that are looking to get started or looking to scale their business. We have something called Elevate Masterclass, which is our training programs. They run between 8 to 10 weeks long, and it's for those that are just beginning. They don't necessarily know how to invest in real estate. We have a program called Fundamentals to Residential Real Estate Investing. So for 8 weeks, we go over all the main fundamentals, the foundations in regards to how to properly do this. And really importantly is that when you come out of there, you have all the tools ready to go and go execute and go do it. The second program that we have are for people that are maybe taking it kind of to the next level, or for those that don't have any money. It's very common that I don't have any money, I need it. And it's called Raising Capital Through Joint Venture Partnership. So how do I raise money for the purposes of acquisition? That's a 10-week program where we teach people how to attract money, how to attract people that are looking to invest in real estate, but just don't have the knowledge or skill set. And then last but not least, so these are for individuals that are really trying to take it to the next level. And it's about buying apartment buildings or multifamily investing. And so multifamily investing is a different animal, different world. You can't use the same tools that you've learned on how to invest in a single family home and use that for the purposes of multifamily investing. It's a completely different animal. You are buying a business. And that's an 8-week program that we cover off. And so we are currently doing our intake right now. Our program started in January of 2023 in our investing series. So again, it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and 8 weeks long. And for those that are interested or wanting to learn more, check out our website. Go to thesavvyinvestor.ca, thesavvyinvestor.ca. There's lots of information that's there. And like I said, please check it out. And like I said, don't hesitate to reach out if you've got some questions. I'm happy to answer anything that you have. And again, it's really designed for individuals that are really wanting to kick some serious butt in 2020.
Yeah, and I can vouch for you. Even like a 15-minute call that we've had regarding looking at a multifamily building blew me away with the information, man. So happy for what you're doing, and for all those potential investors out there, definitely don't be afraid to check out Mike's work and check out the previous podcast. Mike, thank you so much again for joining us, guys. Again, another episode of the YBR Remo Show. If you're liking the show, rate us on iTunes, Spotify, share it out, because we need the support. There's no ads, no nothing. We just get great guests to come on and share good information. So thank you. we'll see you next time.